Presiding Officer, when I got elected to Parliament in 2001, one of the biggest things in my entry at that stage was the then plan to close the prison in Peterhead. That prison, of course, had been opened in 1888. The only other thing I know about 1888, it was the year Celtic Football Club started. Peterhead was built at a cost of £57,400, and the land upon which it was built was £5,000. I'm delighted that after a long community-based campaign, which I was very happy to support and contribute to, we now have a community-facing prison at a rather more substantial cost than the £57,400 that the original prison cost. And it's already, I think, showing signs that it will contribute materially to the way in which things operate in criminal justice in the North East. Now, the staff, of course, at Peterhead are what make or break what goes on in that prison, and that's true of prisons elsewhere, and indeed in the whole community justice space, and in dealing with offenders and people who are looking as if they're heading to offenders. We need good people in place, and I think, by and large, that's exactly what we have. But prisons ain't the answer. Pure economics tells us that. The cost of keeping people in prison can be as much as £40,000 a year. The cost of treating people outside so that they're less likely to reoffend. Not only do we know it's more successful in achieving that aim, but the cost is likely to be a quarter of that. So for people who say, bang them up, put them in prison and throw away the key, what they're actually saying is, take money out of socially useful ways in which we could spend money and waste it on something that isn't going to deliver anything very meaningful indeed. Margaret Mitchell and I spoke 10 years ago, oh, here she is, 10 years ago on victims and witnesses in 2005. We haven't heard an awful lot about victims in this debate. I hope that we'll hear a little bit more, because at the end of the day, the victims are actually the most important people in any consideration of criminal justice, because they're the ones whom, frankly, are often marginalised in the process, much as we've tried to do more. Now, our incarceration rates are far too high. That's for sure. If in particular we look at Scandinavian countries, they're about a third of what they are here. Now, the good news is that the United States is 4 times our rate, so I suppose we're considerably better than some, but not as good as we need to be. The then executive in 2004 in a consultation used the headings reduce, rehabilitate and reform. And I think that's an excellent way of looking at the activities we have to undertake. And indeed, even the 1839 Prisons Act had as a central part of that act that the purpose of prison was reforming criminals. So reformation and reforming criminals is not a new idea. Although I think it would be fair to say that in 1839, punishment probably was pretty central to what was going on. The Justice 1 Committee did an inquiry into reoffending in 2004, and Aberdeenshire Council said the prison environment cannot of itself be conducive to achieving the desired outcome of reducing reoffending. And I don't think anybody in the debate has said otherwise. Clive Fairweather, the late lamented Inspector of Prisons, was a great supporter of out-of-prison rehabilitation, and we miss him and his sage advice. Not a man I agreed with on every political matter, I hasten to add, but I think on this matter he was very clear. Now, we've heard a little bit about the definition that's in the bill of what community justice needs to be. I think I and the rest of us should be slightly heartened by the document the government's produced, the new model for community justice in Scotland, which came out in September 2015, which says the collection of agencies and services in Scotland that individually and partnership work to manage offenders, prevent offending. And I think that is absolutely crucial. And I hope that those words that the government has already written on something they've published are roughly similar to those that we may end up seeing in the bill. And indeed, I think if I look at section 17 of the bill, which talks about the outcomes improvement plan, first of all, I'm heartened by the use of the word outcomes, because I think that anchors what the plan has to be about. You know, let's be unduly prescriptive about methods, but let's focus on outcomes. And I think that creates, in the existing way in which the bill is constructed, the opportunity for these plans to address the issue of preventative spend, reducing offending, because that ought, above all, to be the outcome that we seek. Now, Presiding Officer, just in my final remarks, I think I just want to say I'm very reluctant, and always am reluctant, to add another layer to any organisation. And I perhaps have yet to be convinced, I've not been engaged in this as it's gone through the committee, that actually adding another layer in and of itself is going to help very much. It may well do, it can do, but I'm instinctively needing to be persuaded. And similarly, just the whole process of planning, it is quite clear that the plans have to come from the community planning partnerships up to national level. But when a plan is produced by person A but has to be implemented by person B, you have the risk of there not being buy-in. I'm hugely enthusiastic where the plans come from the grassroots, reflect the experience of people at the grassroots, there's more chance that they'll be successful. Presiding Officer.